Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I hope the week's gone well. I'm looking forward to tomorrow when I'm the speaker at my own business club called Mindspeak. That's going to be at the Intercontinental. We serve breakfast from 9:30. I think my presentation will take about 45 minutes. I'm going to cover the state of the world, currency markets, oil warfare, Africa, Charlie Hebdo, geopolitics, is Africa rising, the EAC, Boko Haram, a whole bunch of things. Looking forward to that tremendously. There is a link for a 6-minute sort of promo of Mindspeak. If you don't know what it is, do take a look at that. That's on rich wrap-ups. The philosophy of Mindspeak was informed, interestingly, by the Mevlana, and an inscription which is written as you enter the mausoleum in Konya, and it reads like this: "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again, come, come." It was so powerful as I walked in that one evening. I thought, that's the most marvellous thing I've ever read, entering a place of worship. We serve breakfast from 9:30 at the Intercontinental, and it's rather good, and I hope you can make it tomorrow. It's a free to attend forum. Macro thoughts, because I'm going to speak a little bit about this, is that the oil warfare specialist, President Obama, has successfully wrestled the price of crude oil to below $50 a barrel, and with that effected a chokehold on Putin, Venezuela, and others as far afield as Nigeria and Angola. Home thoughts, I go back to Rumi: "You were born with wings, why prefer to crawl through life? Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth," he's also said. And then, because of this tremendous photograph that someone posted of the billionaire Saudi king being buried in the ground, and I'll put up that photograph, nameless grave for a billionaire king, Saudi Arabia's austere burial rites, took me back to the famous Latin phrase "sic transit gloria mundi," Latin phrase that means "thus passes the glory of the world." It has been previously interpreted as worldly things are fleeting, and indeed, when you look at the grave, you certainly think that. The phrase was used in the ritual of papal coronation ceremonies between 1409 and 1963. As the newly chosen Pope proceeded from the sacristy at St. Peter's Basilica in his sedia gestatoria, the procession stopped 3 times. On each occasion, a papal master of ceremonies would fall to his knees before the Pope, holding a silver or brass reed, bearing a tau of smouldering flax. For 3 times in succession, as the cloth burned away, he would say in a loud and mournful voice, "Pater Sancte, sic transit gloria mundi." Holy Father, so passes worldly glory. These words, thus addressed to the Pope, served as a reminder of the transitory nature of life and earthly honours. The staff-like instrument used in the aforementioned ceremony is known as a sic transit gloria mundi, named for the master of ceremonies' words. Emily Dickinson used the line in a whimsical Valentine, written to William Howland in 1852, and subsequently published in the Springfield Daily Republican: "Sic transit gloria mundi, how doth the busy bee, dum vivamus, I stay, my enemy." And then I'll put up that photograph about which I'm talking, which was on the front page of my website yesterday. I came across this as the starting lines of a story in the New Yorker. The question was, could one terribly good girl ever, in her mother's eyes, equal one boy? And the answer was no, and I beg to differ. And on that note, I'll put up a photograph of my Hannah horse riding at Fairmont, Mount Kenya, and I would like to also mention Aisha and Layla, whom I adore very much, and their mother. Political reflections. Custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, issued a royal order today relieving Prince Khalid bin Bandar bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud Bandar Bouj, Chief of General Intelligence, of his post. This was reported in France 24. And my conclusion is that firing Bandar Bouj is a singular signifier because Bandar has sat at the apex of Saudi intelligence for so many years and is also so well connected to the Bush entourage in particular. I'll put up a photograph of the Saudi King Salman at King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh on January the 27th, 2015. Interesting piece in Foreign Policy, actually, about Barack Obama's pivot to Iran. With President Obama's welcome and warmly received trip to India this week, commentators have dusted off the well-worn platitudes associated with the administration's once vaunted pivot to Asia. The week's other events, however, from the president's decision to cut his stay in Delhi short, to attend King Abdullah's funeral in Riyadh, to the chaos in Yemen, from ongoing nuclear diplomacy with Iran to Netanyahu's efforts to ensure his relationship with Obama will be seen as the most toxic in the history of Israel and the United States, suggest this administration's foreign policy legacy may ultimately center on a different strategic rebalancing. This one will benefit, however, in ways once unimaginable in US foreign policy circles, the Islamic Republic of Iran. He says if the president thinks a brief drop-by in Saudi Arabia is going to somehow offset the House of Saud's fury at an Iran deal, that he's not paying attention. What's more, the United States is now providing the air power that is enabling Iranian forces to gain and hold ground for their client, effectively putting a big chunk of Iraq even deeper in Iran's pocket. I think one could argue that President Bush did that, actually. It is an especially peculiar development of the past weeks that when America's historic allies, the Israelis, launched an attack that killed an Iranian general in Syria, they were in fact eliminating a member of a military organization that is currently fighting alongside and in coordination with the United States next door in Iraq. And saying it's not even close, he said Carter and Begin was bad, but this is worse. That seems about right to me. Obama has done plenty to damage the relationship, and his staff hasn't helped with the descriptions of Netanyahu as chicken shit. The most recent downturn is, of course, Bibi Netanyahu accepting Bona's offer to speak to the US Congress, which is really an appalling breach of protocol. I think Havana was the aperitif, and that the Tehran rapprochement is real and the main course. I wrote about this a while back on the 28th of October 2013 when I spoke about Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani, the two Husseins. And I quoted Ai Weiwei. I was playing on the names Barack Hussein Obama and Hassan Rouhani. And I quoted Ai Weiwei, a name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights. No matter how poor or how rich, all living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes and the expectant blessings of kindness and virtue. Isn't that beautiful? Now we're saying that the Pax Americana in the Middle East, if it were a three-legged stool, the US would be the most important leg, Israel second, Saudi Arabia third. Neither Riyadh nor Tel Aviv are really aligned with President Obama's Iranian rapprochement, however. Put up a photograph of President Hassan Rouhani. The Independent's Robert Fisk is saying the prisoner swap has only one purpose for ISIS: recognition its Islamic State exists and that foreign nations acknowledge its power. saying, however tragic the ending, the weird and unprecedented prisoner swap of a failed suicide bomber, an Air Force pilot and a journalist has only one purpose for ISIS: recognition that its Islamic State exists and that foreign nations acknowledge its power. Kenji Goto is seen on a television screen in Japan, and it's a mighty sad story, isn't it? All these innocent people. And I go back to a quote from Adam Curtis, who says, "Images contaminate us like a virus." Ukraine, apparently, and I didn't know this, is the equivalent of 1/3 of the entire arable land in the European Union. MH370, Independent's got a story, 9 things we will never know about the disappearance of the Malaysian airline. And what a strange story it was. And for me, that disappearance, and really no proper explanation given around it, confirms, I said, the signal announcing this new arrhythmic world, or new arrhythmic normal in which we live, was the disappearance of MH370. Currency markets: euro 113.46, dollar index 94.56, dollar yen 117.81, Swissy 0.92, the pound 150.73. Aussie, that's having a terrible time, 0.7791, dropping nearly 2% to 0.7720 at one point overnight, a low not seen since July 2009. India rupee 61.746, South Korean won 1093.31, Rial 260.32, and the pound, Egyptian pound, that's fallen sharply. I mean, we were at 7.15 for a very, very long time, you'll remember. Now we're at 7.58.95, and that's the official rate. South African rand 11.52.83. I think there's been some euro buying of the rand post Draghi's quantitative stimulus. I agree with this comment I found on Bloomberg. "We're happy to sit on our long US dollar position for the next 3 to 5 years," he said. "We're just enjoying the momentum." Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target remains 100. The next key data for the dollar is an advanced reading on US GDP later in the day, and economists are looking for 3% GDP growth October to December. I think that's going to surprise to the upside. Shark, the Dubai Mall, I still love that shark, and it goes back to my thoughts about the dollar, that it's going to rally, and the US economy is the comeback kid of 2015, and that if we want to be the sharks, be long the dollar, we have to move. And I said a rate hike, even as small as 0.25%, will be the catalyst for a renewed surge in the dollar, in my view. Euro dollar, we're having a little bit of a bounce here, just below 113.50. I think, it gets very oversold, but bounces get very violent. You got the Swiss central bank operating on the Euro Swiss in order to try and weaken the Swiss. So you got a few moving parts, but ultimately we're going down to parity. Crude oil, $44.65. My target is below 40. Go back to 13th of October when I wrote that piece, Who Kneecapped Oil. I'll also put up a 3-month chart, and you can see it's been a relentless downdraft. Gold came off hard yesterday, 1261.10, had gotten very toppy on a safe haven bid. Cocoa futures are down about 21% since touching a 3-year high in September during the worries about Ebola. Coming to Africa, Diageo News have given us some insights on their Africa business. They've released their first half earnings results, talking about an overall performance improvement in Africa, net sales up 5%. Kenya, we've begun to lap the excise duty change on Senator. African regional markets performance has improved as beer in Ghana and Cameroon is in good growth. Angola, better route to market is improving that. Successful launch of Origin and the improved performance of Sats and Brow drove growth in beer despite softness in other brands. Johnny Walker delivered very strong performance. Spirits in Africa were up 19% with double-digit growth in every market, would you believe? Across Africa, we have continued to build our route to consumer and invested in our brands. So that's interesting, positive backdrop from them. Ebola outbreak, virus mutating, scientists warn researchers at the Institut Pasteur in France, which first identified the outbreak last March, are investigating whether it could have become more contagious. They are tracking how the virus is changing and trying to establish whether it's able to jump more easily from person to person. We know the virus is changing quite a lot. A virus can change itself to less deadly but more contagious, and that's something we're afraid of. African Union, this will be a coup de grace, may appoint Mugabe as its next chairman, the AFP is reporting. Widely expected to succeed Mauritanian President Abdelaziz at the Continental Bloc's two-day summit that begins in Addis Ababa on Friday. 90-year-old's appointment would send mixed signals and an extremely awkward message on international levels on how the AU stands on principles of democracy and good governance. You could say that again. I'll put up a photograph of a tweet I found. 24th AU Summit, 484th meeting at AU PSC at level of HOSG. Economic freedom expands in many parts of Sub-Saharan Africa. This is the Heritage Organization saying Sub-Saharan Africa lacks a free economy. Well, we knew that. Home to only one classified as mostly free Mauritius. A majority of the region's economies are either mostly unfree or repressed. 6 of the world's 10 biggest score improvements, however, 6 out of 10 came in Africa: Sao Tome, Principe, DRC, Togo, Senegal, Burundi and Zimbabwe. And interestingly, the Burundi story, the improvement, Trademark had a very interesting insight. Frank Matzert, if you haven't had a chance to listen to his Mind Speak, have a look at it, because they did a lot of work in Burundi. Yet despite the substantial growth momentum evident in many economies in Sub-Saharan Africa, the region as a whole continues to underperform in following through on policy changes that will help the emergence of a more dynamic private sector. There is a link with the index of economic freedom if you go to have a look at that. The South African All Share. Well, you know, I wrote about it last week, saying I thought money was going to come out of Europe, supported, plus displacement of funds that were going into Nigeria coming south. South African All Share up 2.44% year to date. Dollar Rand 11.5293. At least 44 dead, over 80 injured in attacks on Egypt police headquarters and other targets in Sinai. I'll put up a photograph someone posted. Egyptian pound, as I said, has been on a weakening track post the rate cut, and I think it's a managed managed climb down. The Egyptian stock market is the best performing stock market in Africa, up 10.31% year to date. Staving off Nigeria's next train wreck, Africa's biggest democracy is pushing ahead with its next election. Here's why that could be a mistake. This is something written by Princeton N. Lyman in Foreign Policy, saying that Nigeria is scheduled to hold elections in February. They should be postponed. Country is heading into these elections with insufficient preparation, extreme tensions, and racked by Boko Haram, the brutal Islamist insurgency whose murders and kidnappings have shocked the world. No national consensus in Nigeria how to deal with this insurgency. Matter has become deeply politicized. All this points to the likelihood of fraud, contention, violence in the wake of the election. No matter who wins, the country will not break apart, but large parts of it may become ungovernable, and the depredations of Boko Haram and perhaps other militias will increase. On the 10th of November, I said that, turning to the markets in Africa, the Naira and the All Share have been wagadoogooed by the collapse in the price of oil, and that remains the defining problem. As the currency heads to 200, the central bank does not have the firepower. It doesn't. What it's done is sucked up the liquidity, dried it out. So there's very little trading going on. They are indeed in the eye of the storm. And the All Share is down 14.47% so far this year, and in January the worst performing index anywhere in the world. Apparently, in Yola, Nigeria, youths angry at failure to fight Islamic uprising stoned the president's convoy. I'll put up a banner for President Goodluck Jonathan hanging at a campaign event in Port Harcourt. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 4.42% so far this year. I tweeted this morning because somebody was asking about the oil price and the impact on the oil and gas sector here. And I said the lower oil price equals a massive grassroots stimulus, which is positive. Prices of oil are at $44.61 a barrel. I think Afrin is the harbinger for the oil sector here right now. Afrin has lost about 97% of its value over the last 12 months. Kenya counter-terrorism operations undermine rights, no justice for security force abuses. Human Rights Watch Kenyan authorities need to find lawful ways to address the country's growing security problems, said Leslie Lefkow, Deputy Africa Director. Instead, from Mandera to Mombasa, Kenyan forces use tactics that have resulted in abuses of thousands of people. And I said, the asymmetric threat remains potent and real. And I think the government's response has been like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And in particular, I think, the assassination policy on the coast invites escalation. And my hometown, Mombasa, is bearing the brunt of the blowback onto tourism, and it's in deep trouble. I'll put up a photograph from Mombasa taken from English Point Marina and refer you back to an article I wrote on the 31st of December. Tourism will need a calm 2015 for full recovery, I said. Tourist economy worth well north of $1 billion, which I'm experiencing as I write this at the Swahili Beach Hotel in the south coast, listening to the Indian Ocean breeze and anticipating my boat trip tomorrow to see the dolphins, where sadly we didn't see any, but I had a very nice crab and I saw a turtle. Going to remain a drag on 2015 GDP product. There is no silver bullet, I said. Once upon a time we used to count elephants on our road trips from Mombasa to Nairobi. This time we were counting foreign tourists, and they were very thin on the ground. I said we have a fabulous offering, but it's been shot down in the insecurity crossfire. Israeli prime ministers would also talk of a period of calm before entering into any negotiations with the Palestinians, normally a stalling tactic. And I said, but here the tourism sector needs at least a 12-month period of calm before it can recover. And then I jumped to Nassim Taleb, who wrote, places that depend on tourism, for example, are particularly susceptible to perceived instability. The calm before the storm, he calls it, and he was talking about how if you've encountered volatility, it makes you stronger. Volatility signals stability. The key words are perceived instability. It's all about the perception. And we live now in a 24 hours, always-on world. And I've yet to see the plan which bends the perception curve. So I put the photograph I took of Swahili Beach at dawn. Interesting East African commentary by Diageo News. East Africa's performance with volume and net sales up 7%, volume, net sales up 11%, driven by robust performances in both beer and spirits. Double-digit net sales growth of Tusker and Guinness for East Africa, along with value offerings Balozi in Kenya and Kibo Gold in Tanzania, more than offset the continued decline of Senator. And basically it looks as if we're going to see some rather strong numbers, which was what I was predicting. I think it bodes well for their earnings release in February. I'll put up a link for their share price data. I'm very bullish on them actually, and I think you can have a tight stop at 300, where about 314 goes to 400. Spirits in Africa were up 19% with double-digit growth in every market. And I'll put up a photograph of Charles Ireland, myself, Chris Karubi at a Johnny Walker party that they hosted. Tallow oil in Africa, oil I wrote on the 31st of December, are hoping for a Hail Mary pass, and I'm afraid it's not going to happen. Oil prices will stay lower and for longer than any prediction, except a couple I've seen very recently. Look at what's happened to Afrin PLC, minus 97.17% over 12 months. Click on the link. I got the Bloomberg link there. Kenya shilling 91.791. Nairobi all share up 1.44% year to date. NSE 20 up 1.6% year to date. Plenty of alpha. and bombed out stocks like Kenya Airways and Mundi Sugar recovering very nicely. Thank you. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I hope to see you tomorrow. It's free entry, give you breakfast. I'm going to talk, as I said, about these various subjects, and there seems quite a lot of interest in all these sorts of things: currency markets, geopolitics, and all that kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to pulling it all together for myself as well as for the audience, and I hope to see you then. Come and say hello.